Good evening and welcome to our event this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that there's people from all around the world here tonight, Southampton alumni, supporters, staff, students and members of the local community. And I also know the weather is glorious. It's even glorious here in Glasgow, which never happens. So thank you ever so much for taking the time to come and join us this evening. I should say that more people signed up to come and see Professor Dame Wendy Hall and I than signed up to see John Sopel, who is a fellow Southampton alumni and not at all a rival of mine. So I'm very pleased about that too. Thank you. My name's Zoe Kleinman. Let me introduce myself briefly. I'm the technology editor of the BBC and I'm also a Southampton alumna myself. 100 years ago, I graduated from the university. I'm absolutely delighted to be here this evening with the brilliant Professor Dame Wendy Hall. She's one of the world's leading experts in artificial intelligence and she and I talk often about various news lines to do with AI, often from a cruise ship, I think, Wendy, but, wherever you need to do your thinking, that's fine. Over the next hour or so, we're going to dive into the fascinating world of AI, the challenges that it represents, the promise that it brings, and more importantly, how it's going to shape our future. And I think that is so important because it really is going to affect everybody's lives if it isn't already. I've been covering tech for many years here at the BBC, and I have to say that the rise of AI has been one of the most exciting and fast-moving developments that I've witnessed. And I think it certainly will be, from my point of view, the story of my career and indeed of my lifetime. It's something that comes with a lot of potential problems and also a lot of potential benefits if we get it right. And the question of how we get it right is something that enormously divides opinion. There are lots of different thoughts about which way we should be approaching this rapidly evolving and very smart tech. And the person we should all be listening to, of course, is Professor Dame Wendy Hall, who has all the answers. Let me tell you quickly how we're going to do this. We are going to chat for the next half an hour or so. I've got lots of questions, and I know that the audience is going to have lots of questions as well. So we're going to get to as many questions as we can in the last half an hour of the session. I feel like Professor Dame Wendy Hall doesn't really need much introduction. She is a pioneer of computer science. She's one of the most influential figures in the world of artificial intelligence and web science. She's Regius Professor of Computer Science and Director of the Web Science Institute at the University of Southampton, where she's worked for more than 40 years. You must like it there, in addition to being a proud member of the alumni community, just like me. In 2023, Dame Wendy was appointed to the United Nations High-Level Advisory Board on Artificial Intelligence. Her service and dedication to the field have earned her numerous accolades, including a damehood for her services to science and technology. And Dame Wendy is also particularly passionate about promoting the role of women in technology and has done that consistently throughout her career. She's been an inspiration to lots of women, including me. Dame Wendy, a warm welcome to you. I'm so glad that you could join us. You're hot on the heels of returning from the USA, as am I. I hope the jet lag was kinder to you than it was to me. But I think we're back in the same time zone now. So let's get started. I think we should begin by saying what we mean about artificial intelligence when we use that term AI. There's a tendency to focus on generative AI, isn't there? Things like ChatGPT, image generators, video generators, and that's because it's the thing most people see. It's the most visible, but it's only a small part of the pie, isn't it?
It is. Let me just start by saying, love to see you again, Zoe. I always love it when you WhatsApp me when I'm on a cruise. So, what do you think of this story? And I'm also, yes, a proud alumni of Southampton, and I'm very proud to have worked here. I was tempted away a few times, but I've always stayed at Southampton because it's always been the right place for me to work from, and very proud of that. So, and please. You can call me Wendy if you now we're into
now you said it, I will.
Yes, please do. So I usually, so when the media talk about AI, it's very unclear what they're really talking about. And most people at the moment are talking about what the generative AI does, and we can come back to that. I usually go back to saying that, in fact, it all started 75 years ago. We're celebrating that later this year. We're running an event about Alan Turing and his Turing test. But he wrote the paper 75 years ago, asking the question, could machines think? This is before we had any machines, really, effectively. And then the meme started. The term AI was coined in the 60s in the States, and they were trying. It largely came out of the philosophy. There were no computers then that you could do anything with. They were very, very embryonic then, and no data to do the sorts of things we do today. So they were really thinking about, could you build a machine that thinks like a human being? Could we mimic the human brain? And it was very hard to do with the computers then, as I say, and people started to do decision-making expert systems. But the other thing, when I came back to Southampton, I started as a mathematician. When I came back to Southampton as a computer scientist in 1984, there was a lot of AI work already happening in Southampton, and there was some expert system work, but it was a lot about, we have and still have a very well-known electronics department. We're now electronics and computer science, but that's another story. And it was all about the work then was all about trying to, if a machine was going to be able to think, it needed to understand the world it was in. So it needed to have the sensory perception, needed to be able to see, it needed to be able to hear, it needed to be able to speak, it needed to be able to read natural language and speak natural language. So it was text processing, image processing, video processing, and that was where the world was. And actually, when we look at an image in an instant, we can work out what it's about. A machine, it takes an awfully long time to train a machine, to learn to train machines to do that. We still haven't quite got there, but the last 40 years, that's something that has come on in leaps and bounds, and as the computers have got more powerful. But that was how AI was thought of then, and then we had expert systems, and then we moved into this world of neural networks. And I remember again, my early days in Southampton, there were people in our department working on the idea of neural networks, which is Geoffrey Hinton just got the Nobel Prize, right? He's a Brit, famously a Brit.
Let's pause for a quick glossary moment and explain what a neural network is.
Well, I was just going to do that, Zoe.
You're way ahead.
But it's really, you have people understand. We have neurons in the brain. They send signals to each other, right? That's how the brain communicates one bit to another. Is through the neurons. And it was like, can we mimic that in a machine? And of course, the more neurons you have, we make jokes about this. They haven't got any neurons. The more neurons you have, the cleverer you're going to be, or the more you're going to be able to interpret information, and that the networks get explosively more complicated the more neurons you have and the more layers you have in that model. That was Geoffrey Hinton's idea. He had to leave the UK because everyone said he was mad. He couldn't get funding here to do it, and that's when he went to America and then to Canada. But we still famously think of him as he was a Brit. He got trained at Edinburgh, but it was so that was, when did he go? In the late 70s? It was a long time ago when these ideas began to emerge. And at Southampton, I won't reel off the names, but I can remember the people at Southampton that were doing that work. And it was a real struggle to get the funding because the government at the time said, we're not going to fund this stuff. It's not going anywhere. Now, here we are 40 years later, maybe 30 years later, when this work began to mature. It's gone into the commercial world as what we call large language models, generative AI, foundation models. They're all different words for the same thing, which is actually that sort of network with the predictive modeling that they use. And if you want to know what predictive modeling is, it's what you have on your phone. It predicts the next word. Well, that's effectively what the generative AI do. They in very, very clever ways, use these neural networks. Machine learning, that's a phrase I should have used earlier. It's all about how we train machines to understand the world.
It's kind of advanced pattern spotting, isn't it?
Yeah, you could say it like that. Yeah, yes, you could.
And while ChatGPT has a lot to answer for, I think, in terms of shaping the way in which people view AI, it's really one application, and there are some that are arguably more exciting. What for you is the most exciting application for AI at the moment?
Actually, it's in terms of application, let me just answer the exciting things at the moment, because it's all in a way neural networks and generative AI are a form of machine learning. And again, universities like Southampton have been doing this and teaching it for a long time, as have all the big universities in the UK that have big AI research groups. And the key thing that makes the difference today, why we can actually deliver results as clever people push the frontiers of the science forward, is the huge compute power we can draw on, which of course is part of we could talk about the energy supplies for that down the line, and the huge amounts of data. And the data is there because we have the internet. I mean, before I became a AI policy geek and started advising governments in that area, I was most well known for the work I've done on the internet and the World Wide Web. And it's that availability of the internet through the World Wide Web that has enabled us to share data and build up these huge amounts of data. And these new models, the generative AI models, are trained basically on the whole of the internet, which is a mind-boggling idea. And also part of its flaws, as well as this is the friend or foe thing. Okay, we can come back to that.
And problematic.
Well, all sorts of problems involved in scraping the internet every day, and we'll come back to that maybe. But you asked about applications, and I am an optimist, although I think we have to be very careful about how we approach AI and how we mitigate the risks, because there are risks. But I am a huge optimist, and AI is going to lead to profound breakthroughs in science, because we have the data. You hear the scientists, the biologists, the chemists, the physicists, the medics, they have access to huge data, and AI can analyze that data in ways we couldn't begin to do. So I like to think of it as teamwork. Working with AI, scientists will make huge breakthroughs. The obvious one to talk about, because I think it's the one people can grasp most easily, is for health, both in terms of new drugs, new cures for treatment, personalized cures, the ability that AI has to read scans faster and more accurately than human beings. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean the end of the job of the radiologist. What they do will change, but we need skilled people still in that sort of area. But you used the phrase when we were talking before about how AI will take the drudge out of life, and it will, but it doesn't mean that the people that do that job, as say the radiologists do today, their world they're not going to disappear overnight, because they'll be able to do other more advanced things, and work with the doctors more to be able to pinpoint better what treatments patients need.
It bothers me though, that phrase, Wendy. That's something that Microsoft says, that AI will take the drudgery out of work, whether that's viewing hundreds of mammogram scans every day and worrying about missing something, or whether that's, the boring office admin that we all hate but have to do. But my point is that for lots of people, for loads of people, the drudgery is the work. Well, and if they're not doing that, what are they going to be doing? Well,
history tells us that new breakthroughs in technology lead to more jobs, not less. Overall. Now, there are always short-term winners and losers, yes, and this is partly what government policies have to do, is get over that sort of the tipping points of when jobs start to go before new ones are created. But I always tell the story of my father, who he'd have been over 100 if he was alive today. He was born in 1919. He was an accountant after he did his service in the war, and was a prisoner of war in Germany for 5 years. Wow. And by the end of his career in the 1980s, he was running being a finance director for a relatively large engineering company, and they did everything by hand. Everything. Ledgers, copying. He could divide pound shillings and pence by pound shillings and pence in his head. Certainly, they had to do all that long division. Remember long division? We don't have to worry about that these days.
I do. Well, my dad was very upset that I never knew how to use the slide rule. He thought that, it was a terrible failing in my education.
Was that because you went to a girls' school? Because I didn't learn. I wasn't taught how to use a slide rule. No, I didn't learn, but he did, and he thought that it was affecting my brain training. I didn't learn to use a slide rule either. And I was at an all-girls school, so it was all log tables. And anyway, today's generation won't understand what we're talking about with slide rules and log tables.
I mean, I don't really either. I don't think it's held me back, but
it was the way you had to do arithmetic, because there weren't calculators, and there weren't there weren't computers. But so the jobs that my father had teams of people doing all that manual work, drudge work, copying, from like the old monks used to in the books before printing, copying from one ledger to another, and all the mistakes that could creep in. And those jobs have all gone. You don't have to do anything, but there are more jobs in the finance industry than you could ever have imagined these days. And, the banks we're moving away from, unfortunately, I do miss having a bank on the high street, but we're moving away to back office, digital. So I used to work in a bank as a summer job, and we used to file checks in a filing cabinet. I remember it very well. It was really dull, but nowadays there's the banks are still employing lots of people, but they're not doing those types of jobs. Everything's all about processing, and the amount what we can do now is just amazing. And of course, sometimes the machines do get it wrong. I mean, look at the crash in 2008. I say the machines get it wrong. The financial crash in 2008 was largely caused, my understanding is that because the people were doing things using computers that we didn't really understand what they were doing. And anyway, that's another whole story about how. But these I'm very.
So you sound like you subscribe to the argument that it will bring more jobs.
Yeah,
jobs will come and go.
I also like to make the point that when calculators were, and I'm old enough to remember when calculators were introduced into classrooms and university lecture theatres before, and people said, over my dead body will my students use a calculator. But the thing about calculators was, if you put the right data in, you got the right answer out. That's how it works. It's still the case. It's not true with AI. You don't, we all know part of the problem with even good old-fashioned AI. Take face recognition, which was in the papers only today, how the police forces, it's creeping in. We all criticize China for using it, but it's creeping into our world increasingly without, I don't think, the right checks and balances, because it makes mistakes. It doesn't always, you'll get false positives. Someone will be picked out because the system thinks you committed this crime and you've been picked up wrongly. And and generative AI is even worse in terms of telling you the wrong answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that kind of brings us on to, what do we do about that? We know that AI is biased. We know that it makes stuff up. We know that it's not reliable. What's the answer?
There is no one answer. We have to. I always come back to, it has to be teamwork. We can't, which is why I don't believe we're suddenly going to have wholesale losses of jobs, because I don't think any CEO or head of a government department is going to hand over their work to AI that can make mistakes. And give you the wrong answers and come out with the wrong decisions. Now, human beings make mistakes. And so it's quite logical. If you ask the original Turing question, can machines think like humans? Well, if they are going to think like humans, they're going to make mistakes just like we do, because this stuff it's not just numerical data, right? It's about making sense of facts. And so you've got to learn what in the AI world you can trust. If where in the AI world mistakes can come in, and you've got to have, I think it's not, you don't want to have something where the human being's got to check every single thing, but we have to work out systems where I think of AI as part of the team. Actually, that's what we've got to think about.
It's like a colleague. It's like a colleague.
Yeah, exactly.
I was at the Paris AI Action Summit back in February, and
yes, as was I.
Yes, what a strange event that was. It felt like there was so much tension and disagreement and jostling for power, but it also felt a bit to me like AI was entering its drill baby drill phase, if you like. and I came away thinking, has safety fallen out of fashion here? I mean, it used to be called the AI Safety Summit, and it isn't anymore. Well, what's going on with that agenda?
Well, there's lots of layers to the question about what happened in Paris and why the UK didn't sign up to the declaration. We could come back that if you want. That's very political.
Yes, well, it blames national security, didn't it?
Well, this is the point. It's like, so the UK has changed the name of its safety institute to its AI Safety Institute to the AI Security Institute, which is a very subtle but important politically change, I think, because the Paris summit, there was so much, there's so much hype in this area. There's so much just lip service to things like ethics and principles and values that people, they'd have no idea how they're going to implement any systems. You know, what does it mean to say that your AI system is ethical, or it follows these moral values? I mean, you know, how are we going to police that think about how we try and do it with society. Why machines aren't going to be any different. What we have to make sure that they're not, we have to make sure that as we build them into our systems, our human systems, as well as just machine to machine systems, that they are as we need safety. They are as safe as they can be, and the security piece is, I think that there is a huge national security issue here, which is largely sort of more aligned to where the cybercrime and this comes in. And what we don't want is AI or bad actors using AI to cause real harm, like bring our infrastructure down.
No, so the UK was right then to be cautious.
Well, you see, I think the UK government was very brave in not signing. There was also the Trump element. You have to remember that, because he'd only been president for a month when that summit happened. And if you were reporting on it, JD Vance stood up and told everybody, particularly the Europeans, that the Americans weren't going to have their tanks on our lawn, the old expression. Trump has said very clearly he doesn't want any regulation in AI coming over from anywhere outside of America. He doesn't
Which for the AI industry is great, right?
Well, for the big companies, for the tech companies, yeah, it is potentially. And it's worrying that he doesn't think there's a need for any sort of regulation. It's anything goes, and that's really worrying, I think.
And that goes against all the advice that people like you have been giving for the last, however many years, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's the same with any new technology. You don't want it, you really got to make sure it's not doing harm. And you see, it's like he doesn't even talk about self-regulation. Biden's executive order was about the companies, you've got to self-regulate. You've got to promise us you'll check your systems before you release them. That's a really big ask. Yeah. Imagine saying to the tobacco industry, "We self-regulate. You sell tobaccos to who you want, but make sure." Self-regulate the issue around the cancer piece. But the so that was only, but Trump even what's the word, rescinded that executive order. So he's not even telling the companies they've got to self-regulate. And I just find that so scary. And it's all this business, the MAGA business of America great again. So it's all about winning the AI race almost at all costs.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's such a powerful and lucrative race. Nobody's going to slow down, are they? I want to talk to you a little bit about.
I would challenge that a bit, but you go on. Yeah, go on.
I want to talk to you a little bit because we are already running out of time, unbelievably.
Oh no, really?
I want to talk to you about the singularity, Wendy, which is that moment where AI surpasses human intelligence, which the tech leaders tell us is coming at us fairly fast. Is it, do you think? And should we be worried about that?
Well, it all feels like there was a time when the web felt like this. I often go back to how there are some analogies with how the web grew, and I could, because we didn't know the dangers down the line of an open web. Right, we're living with them now. All the issues of social media, we can see more with AI where the dangers might be, the risks, and we can see now that we can build systems that are intelligent, cleverer than us. What does that mean? The original idea of AI was machines that could think like human beings. The tech companies like to say they've already reached that point, and so they move the goalposts a bit, and I don't hear the term singularity used so much, like one moment. It won't be like that at all, but they use the term AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which means, because at the moment AI tends to be used in niche areas like health, education, defense, right? It's not what the AGI piece is, where the machines, the AI systems can think across different sectors like we can, right? We can think across different areas, translate our skills, multitasking. And actually the key thing is thinking for themselves, doing things without being instructed by a human being.
We're seeing glimpses of that, aren't we? We're seeing glimpses of them doing things that we don't know why.
No, I think it's.
You're not convinced.
No, and for people that I was going to say, think about 2001 and Hal telling Dave, "I can't do that, Dave." When Dave wants Hal to open the doors, that's when you've got a problem. When the AI does its own thing and stops the human beings doing things, and then you're into the whole world of can AI hit? Can you let an AI kill human beings? You get into the world of AI in weaponry, and in terms of creativity, this is we were going to talk about copyright, weren't we? Can AI be creative? But I think at the moment we aren't at that point, and we have a chance to actually get some governance in that will, like we have governance for nuclear weapons, right? Now, unfortunately, that came in after the terrible events in Japan, where people learned what the effect of a nuclear bomb could be. And Stuart Russell, famously, the ethicist, and he's a Brit who works out in California. He did the lectures, didn't he? He did the BBC, the Reith lecture, very good set of lectures. And he says, oh, I've forgotten what he says. I forgot where I'm going with that one. What was I thinking of? That he, I can't remember what. I can't remember where I was going, but let's go. I'll think of it. Come back.
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. We'll move on. I want to talk to you about something that haunts me a bit, actually. I've recently finished reading Genesis, which is a book written by Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger. And they talk about what they consider to be an inevitable scenario in which we decide whether or not to hand over control to AI, to some AI system. And they say, based on human history, which is what they're trained on, AI is likely to either decide that war is a terrible thing and there'll never be another war because they won't let it happen, or they'll look at human history and say, actually, it's the only way we ever get anything done, and there will always be war. What's your view on that?
Well, it's like the old joke, well, the new joke, which says, you give climate change or global warming, as we used to refer to it, as a problem to AI to solve. And the obvious thing to do is to wipe out all the human beings, right? You reach net zero immediately. That's the same thing as the Genesis book says. That was so interesting, that, because that was written. He died while they were writing that book, didn't they, or before they wrote it?
Yeah.
And this is it is about control. And I remember the Stuart Russell thing is that he's always said we should not allow AI systems to make a decision about killing human beings. Right. But you can see that's already creeping because of the drones and things. Who's commanding those drones to do what they do?
And defence is quite notably omitted, isn't it, from lots of these sort of pledges and commitments?
Well, that's because, there are people looking at it, and they largely, the problem is it overlaps with the national security stuff and the intelligence agencies so much. But so for example, our United Nations report does not cover weapons and war and AI and weaponry.
Was that an active decision?
Yes, because there are the military arena are discussing these things and the ethics of all that and the moral values that we should adopt in this area. But there's always sort of technical creep, in this. And there's always potentially, I think of them as the James Bond villains, the rogue actors, whether they're heads of states or just like heads of crime organizations that use the technology to make money, to win wars, to get power, to get control. That's always a danger. That's what we've got to try and mitigate against, and also check, as the Security Institute is called now, is doing. What are the generative AI? What are the foundation models coming up with? Can you detect whether any of them are actually thinking for themselves and creating new chemical, biological weapons? Or drugs that would harm us? Or we have got to worry about that, just like we do, things like in the aircraft industry and all the transport industries, where we've learnt over time how to keep us safe. Keep the world safe, if you go. And we need to learn that and have global agreements. Just you think of it like the aircraft industry. Say there's a plane crash, everyone worries about what caused it and how you mitigate against that happening again.
I'm going to go to our audience questions in a moment because we have so many. But before I do, one last quick question for me, because I want to end on a positive note. If we do get things right, what does our AI-led future look like, in your opinion?
Well, it's not. Do you remember that car crash of an interview? I shouldn't say this. We're being recorded, aren't we? That interview between Rishi Sunak and Elon Musk.
Yes, it was an interesting evening. Wasn't it?
It was an interesting evening. It's not fair to call it a car crash, really, but it was awkward, I thought. And Elon Musk, he said, this AI is going to be absolutely amazing. Nobody will need to work.
Yes, I remember he talks about universal base high income, didn't he? And I thought that sounds amazing.
Well,
when does that start?
I immediately think back to Thomas More and Utopia, but this is if you're not going to, what does it mean to say no one's going to work? The idea is the sort of, that the AI will be so good, it'll feed us, it'll help us get. It'll keep us healthy. It'll give us food and water, and we won't need to go out to work. Everything will be managed for us. And what are we going to do? Yeah. And I am an optimist, and I genuinely think. Well, the genie's out of the bottle, so we've got to cope with it anyway. But I genuinely think that the good use of AI will help us have better quality lives. And the United Nations report was very much about applying this across the world, not just to the rich West or China. But for the global south, we talk about that a lot in the United Nations report, to help raise the quality of people's lives around the world.
Right, I'm going to quick fire through as many of these as we can get. Okay, are you ready? There's quite a few people actually who are concerned about the impact on the climate. It's something I've reported on as well. You know, is AI likely to lead to a climate crisis, someone asks, due to its significant use of water and electricity?
Well, I don't know about the water piece, but you might be thinking of other types of power stations.
Data centers, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's the data centers, but it's definitely the electricity. It's how the electricity is generated, obviously. I think, ever the optimist, there's research going on about how you could actually turn all that round and use the heat generated by data centers to supply the electricity for your local area.
I should say, by the way, if you want to put your questions into Slido, please do it now. Yes.
So I mean, yes, there are, of course, we have got to be cognizant of that, but I do think we could actually make it a virtuous circle, and because we're going to, you know, to use the AI, we're going to need the data centers. They generate a lot of heat. Let's use that to supply heat. I mean, I was so impressed with, to the local area, to their regional area, and develop. There's work going on in India around this, and but also I was so impressed when I went to Iceland, and they don't pay anything for the electricity because it all comes from the heat from the thermal waters. Mind you, they do have volcanoes exploding all over the place, but I think we could be optimistic about how we could turn that whole debate round, and use them to our advantage.
Okay, next question. How can we ensure AI develops in a way that enhances human decision making rather than replacing it?
Well, I think I've talked about that a bit. I think of it as augmentation, definitely, because, and as I said, I think of it as you have the AI in the team, and when you need an answer, you ask the AI. We will of course anthropomorphize them, give them names and personalities. I mean, this is the sci-fi films always talk about, if you give them personality, then you don't want to kill them off. The film I saw recently was Companion, which was really interesting, about AI companions, and they looked like human beings. They were robots with a very advanced AI in them, and it was the ending is quite scary, as these sci-fi films often are. But I genuinely think that they will think of them as part of the team, and so you'll ask a question, just like people are using ChatGPT or Gemini today to find out, and they will help us do things like, there's nothing wrong with, and we're encouraging our students here at Southampton to use AI to help them write their essays.
You are. That's good, because to start with, it was like, we're going to find a tool that's going to identify that's your
not
AI
the way to do it, and that was the initial gut reaction. But we've actually, under the leadership of a lady called Kate Borthwick at Southampton, we're quite advanced in thinking about advising staff and students how to use it. The problem is, of course, we can't afford to pay for everyone to use this stuff. Right, so you've got inequalities. It's just like when computers emerged. Universities can't pay for every student to have a computer. We can't afford it. But that aside, the inequalities aside, I mean, I think that the students have got to learn that they're going to have to check the work, because the AI is not foolproof. It doesn't come up with the right answer. It makes things up. The problem there, I see, is for the assessment for staff. If you're reading an essay that's been a student has asked ChatGPT to help with, you've got to really, you've got to be just as careful reading it as if, and as a human, as this had been written by a human writer that could have got it wrong.
I think you can spot it as well, can't you? Because it's too verbose. It's kind of too.
Yeah, potentially, potentially, and we will develop AI assessment tools as well for.
And this kind of answer plays to a question that's coming from Susan Sharkey, who says, can you envisage a time when AI is routinely used in education and becomes a teacher's friend by way of taking on tasks like marking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've just said that.
Bring it on.
But we have to be very careful about how we do it. I'm not, this is not, I don't want to be flippant about it. You can't just say, or do whatever you like with it. But again, I remember when computers came out and, we had, I don't know, it's very hard. It's hard marking essays, but marking computer programs is also very difficult. And if you've got hundreds of students in a class, so there are a lot of tools out there now to help you check code and check what, that. So we will develop tools that help with assessment as well. I'm sure. I'm being very positive here, but there's no point in saying to people don't use it, because it's too profound a breakthrough not to use it.
I want another quick question here about education. If AI is going to change our lives, how quickly should we be teaching AI in all university curricula to prepare students?
Yes. So we are beginning to do this. In fact, our competitors down the road, Solent, if there's anyone from Solent here, they've already launched a module for any student to get them, an intro to AI. We here at Southampton have plans to do something similar. Because we're running, I'm directing something we call AI at Southampton, which is all about looking at the research that goes around. It's not all in computer science. There's AI research across the whole university, and of course teaching not using AI in teaching, but teaching about AI across the university. So we have AI at Southampton, and we're developing something for the students, for any student to be able to use. And also, my favourite thing is we have very good course teaching in CS about AI. We have master's programs about AI and machine learning in CS. But we're just launching a master's. It's an MA in AI at Southampton. It's running through the social science department. It's for people who haven't got a technical or mathematical background, who can't learn. They're not going to be able to become machine learning programmers, but they might have done a degree in law or history or politics. What did you do, Zoe?
English literature. Yeah. This sounds like right up my street.
English literature, anything really. We did it with web science. You see, we taught people how to work in the web world, whatever discipline they came from, to understand it, understand the ecosystem. And we're now applying that skill we have to AI. And so then this MA is going to be online, so anyone can do it, and it can be people from any discipline can do it, and I'm very excited about that, I have to say. That starts in September.
Good news. Which field, asks Nufal Anam, I hope I've got that right, was going to be the one where AI will absolutely fail? Who beats AI?
What? Well, philosophy. I don't really know how to answer that one. Who beats AI? In terms of fields, disciplines, is it? I'm not quite sure. What do you answer that one, Zoe? Have you got one? I don't think it's a question of who beats, who wins, right? If we think of it like that, then we're on a bad path, I think.
I hear the view that human values will become even more valuable than they are now. People will really appreciate human personality and postulation more than they do.
Yes. And it's really about, we have people here, one of the people, the postdoc that I work closely with, is thinking about these things and how we actually imbue, if that's the right word, AI systems with moral values. Can we do that? And that's very Asimov again, but can we do that? And then how will people, it's already becoming quite hard to distinguish between, this is the Turing test thing again, can you tell the difference between a machine and a human being? My thing about the Turing test was always that Turing overestimated the intelligence of human beings, because it's actually quite easy to fool people.
And I think in the age of disinformation, we see that writ large.
It's very easy to fool people. Even I'm going to say clever people. That's not fair. People who think a lot about things. The scammers get through if you're busy, and and someone tells you something that sounds plausible. There's all sorts of ways in which you can, and we get things wrong, right? So if you're doing a Turing test and the human gets it wrong and the machine gets it right, does that, it's not as simple as Turing made it, actually. Made it sound.
I want to summarize a few questions that have come in along the same theme, which is concerns that it's going to affect our own abilities. The more AI does for us, will it affect our ability to carry out mathematics, to write code, to think? You and I were talking earlier about how social media rewires your brain. Is there a concern that it will change the way we use our own brains?
It will. I mean, just like calculators and computers have with the maths, right? You might learn. I don't know if kids in school still learn long division and fractions and decimals and division and all that, but I assume they do at some point. But they don't. You don't have to do it on a daily basis, right? You really don't need it. I think that the ability for people to help people craft an essay, design an essay, a piece. I have no idea whether novelists will use it. I think they possibly will. I think it will, but it will certainly, the one thing, for example, it will change is the way if you've got something big to read, you summarize it. Right, so writing the reports for the people who need to know, to analyze the reports and then present them to the board or whoever. AI is going to, it's going to transform that type of work, and I think it will be an advantage. I do think if we can use it well to our advantage, to not just to save money. Because you might need less people doing summaries of stuff. We'll do other things. So what was the question?
Is it going to change the way we use our own brains?
Well, there is the sort of the argument, and I've heard both sides of this debate as to whether it will make us lazy about things, and but there's also, I think, we're never going to get perfect AI. And if you think about it, I genuinely believe that. I've seen papers that prove theoretically that generative AI, because of the way it's designed and trained, has to hallucinate. Right? It has to make things up because it's working on stuff that it knows from the internet, on existing knowledge, and if it hasn't got that, it just makes things up, and it doesn't know whether what it's making up is right or wrong. It doesn't have an understanding of right or wrong, truth or not truth, right? It just doesn't. They don't at the moment. We are flawed in the way we think about things and the way we come up with answers and for things. And I mean, some people will make things up because they don't like to admit they don't know something, or they just tell you something incorrect. So how we think we can create machines that do that better than us, I don't know.
That's an interesting counter argument, isn't it? Sometimes people say to me about the use of AI in law, oh my God, what if it makes a mistake and sends somebody to prison who's innocent? And I say, exactly, that it's not like that's never happened before, is it?
Exactly. So, and again, I like to think of it as teamwork and to improve by augmenting what we do to improve the decision making. And help us be more creative. So I'm sorry, I'm very positive about it, but there are huge.
That's important.
Why am I saying sorry? There are big. It doesn't mean it's it's all safe. We have to work on the safety aspects for sure.
Dave Johnston says, "Can AI understand altruism?"
Well, can it understand anything? At the moment, the AI we have at the moment doesn't understand anything. Right. The generative AI, they're moving into the world of reasoning because generative AI at the moment doesn't reason. We're moving into that world, and this world they call agentic computing. Southampton, by the way, is one of the top multi-agent systems research groups in the world. And not a lot of people know that. And we've been doing multi-agent systems for 20 odd years. One of the founders of multi-agent systems, Nick Jennings, was professor here. He was the first Regius professor, actually. He's now vice chancellor of Loughborough. But we have a great, but they're using the idea of multi-agent systems. So the agents will do a bit of the reasoning, and then they'll talk to the large language models to get the information. But what do you do about the fact the information might be wrong? This world gets very complicated very quickly, and if it's a life or death decision, I mean, I wouldn't want to get in a plane that has any of these systems anywhere near decision making, for example.
I think that's a really powerful point to make, isn't it? It sort of feeds into a question here from somebody who's only called S, who says, what if it's used to make decisions about medical treatment? Well, it is.
Exactly, but then again, it's. I keep using this word team because I don't think we should, at the moment, we should never allow an AI to make a decision over treatment. Down the line, they might do triage. You could argue that they could do the triage thing. There's some, but I think that if it's actually diagnosing what's wrong and prescribing and operating. I mean, look how the surgeons are losing robotics at the moment. But there's still human hands on those robots. Yeah. And
there will be for a while, you think?
Yeah. So let's have some human hands on this stuff. And sorry, we're going through this quite fast.
We are, I'm afraid. It's this is exhausting for you. Aoife Whitford says, I'd like to hear more about your take on agentic AI.
I just said,
and whether it's going to roll out.
Did they just ask that, or did that come in after I mentioned it?
It's coming in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, as I said, Southampton's one of the top places in the world for agent
But
systems.
Do you think agentic AI is coming, or do you think it's?
Yeah, definitely. But
and just briefly describe what it is for people who don't know.
Well, an agent is just what you think of as a human agent, right? You ask it to book your travel, and it will book your flight for you. That sort of idea that you have. And you can move that into the world of the digital, and then agents could talk to other agents. So I could book a flight through one and then say, well, what hotel? And the agent talks to a hotel agent that has more information about that. And that's what the agent world is. And now the idea is that the agents, because agents have always been a part of artificial intelligence, they've done reasoning. They have capabilities to reason about the topic they are programmed to reason about, like flights or hotels or whatever. And now the idea is that they will do reasoning and they'll talk to the LLMs, the large language models, to get the information they need to help with the reasoning. But there's the problem that the LLMs won't always give them the right answer. And who's checking that? So it gets more complicated once you're bringing agents in. But I do think that is the way we're going. And the companies are doing a lot more work on reasoning and LLMs generally. But this is about decision making. It isn't about sentience. It's not about these systems having any understanding of what they're doing at the moment.
A question here that's proved very popular, actually. Which set of AI safety standards, frameworks, or ethical principles do you think is currently the most suitable? My gosh, there must be about 11,000, right?
Well, there's a lot of them, and there's not one answer to that. There isn't. The Europeans would love us to say their AI Act, EU AI Act, but the problem with that is it's very heavy-handed, and it
Nobody
is
had a good word to say about it in Paris, did they?
No, well, except the French, probably.
Except the French, they like it.
I mean, and the European Commission would say they like it, but it's people argue that it's and I would too, that it stifles innovation because you're so worried about the rules and regs that you can't do anything. And of course the Americans are not going to adopt it. And it potentially, I mean, Trump has said, and I think this was going to be the case before, that we're just not going to play in Europe because we're not going to be bound by your rules and regulations. Now the UK, because of Brexit, has the ability to sidestep that. I mean,
so there is a position for us here.
Yeah, and I think we have people look to us as a soft power in this area, right? We have a lot of skills in the area of regulation, governance, and we went under the radar a bit, but the white paper on this that the previous government released on innovative approach to regulation was actually quite a good white paper, and we're getting our existing agencies like Ofcom and I can't remember all the names, but the agencies that deal with this type of stuff are using them as they are, and then the new idea this government's talking about is coordinating that. And
that's this idea that if you feel like you've been discriminated against by AI, you go to the Equalities Commission, just like you would in any other situation.
Yeah, but you need a coordinating body so that these are joined up in the way they work. And I think there's a good chance that that's a good model actually. So I'm back in UK on this.
I do feel like everyone said, please regulate the AI sector, that we all want to be regulated. We don't want to go down the same road as social media. And then the EU did it and everyone went, not like that, not like that.
Well, I'll tell you who does it the best. China.
I mean, that is the massive player that we don't.
Nobody ever talks about it because we just think the title, very clever title of this conversation is "Friend or Foe." Is China a friend or foe when it comes to AI? And they very early on with the internet, when the web came out, China 1997, they immediately saw that it was a way. Yes, for people to communicate and use machines to help them get information, but it was also a way to create revolution, right? Because people could talk about stuff, and the big thing in China is you always got to stop the revolution because you don't have elections. Anyway, so they brought in, basically. They have privacy laws in China and all sorts of things businesses can't do. But the key thing is the Chinese government can look at anything. That's the difference between them and us. And I always used to say, well, if you don't mind losing freedom of speech, China's a good place to be in this internet world. Actually, we're all beginning to realize we're losing freedom of speech too. So that's, but in terms of the AI world, China's just as worried about the risks of AI as we are. And they're playing in, they're on the UN body, and they've brought in a number of laws that really makes life safer in China than we have. Well, I'm just writing a paper. Huh?
There is a sentence I don't think I hear very often. Thank you. We're going to have to leave it there, Wendy, I'm afraid. I have loved this conversation. I could talk to you all evening. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you to everyone who's been watching. We asked the question, AI friend or foe? And I feel like what I've got from you is not only a sense of optimism, but a sense that actually AI is kind of both, but we should consider it to be a companion, a colleague, something that sits alongside us and not something that either can or will replace us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Well done, so there's my summary of
and thank you on behalf of the University of Southampton. Thank you, Zoe.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Listen, before you go, you really must do our short poll. It would not be a webinar without a poll at the end, would it? I think it should be coming up on your screen any second now. Please complete it. It will take a couple of minutes of your time, and it really helps us to put on events like this in the future. If you want to watch the talk again, or you want to recommend it to people who couldn't make it tonight, and you absolutely should do that, of course, we're going to be sharing the footage in the next couple of days. So please do keep an eye on your inbox, and you will get details of how to access it. You can also find details of how to join the mailing list on the email, and that way the university can keep you updated on future events. But for now, that's it from me and from Professor Dame Wendy Hall. Thank you so much for joining us. We can relax now.
This can become a gin and tonic.